This is the homework video guide for section 5.5, and for this video I will start off with question number 2. Now for question number 2, I'm given that f of x is equal to 3x minus 2, and for question 2a I need to evaluate f of 3. Alright, so not a hard problem, and basically what's happening is all the x's are now being replaced with the number 3. So anytime you see an x here, basically that x is being replaced with the number 3. Alright, so what I do first is I write down 3x minus 2. And as mentioned, this x is now going to be replaced with that 3. So if I continue here, this will be 3 times 3 and then minus 2. And 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 minus 2 is going to be 7. So for question 2a, the answer is going to be 7. Okay, and let me just move on to question 2c first. Now for question 2c, I'm given that the x value is now replaced with the letter k. So if I know that f of x is equal to 3x minus 2, basically what's happening is this x is being replaced with k. So I need to evaluate f of k, right? So basically this x value here will now be replaced with k, and then I have my minus 2. Well, 3 times k is just going to be, it will be 3k and then minus 2. So that's your final answer for question 2c. Let me just go back now to question 2b now. So I know that f of x is equal to 3x minus 2, and I need to evaluate f of negative 4, right? So f of negative 4. All right, so this x is being replaced with negative 4, so this x will be replaced with negative 4 as well. So 3 times negative 4 in brackets and then minus 2, and 3 times negative 4 is going to be negative 12, and negative 12 minus 2 is going to be negative 14. So negative 14 is the answer for question 2b. And for question 2d, I'm given that f of 2x minus 2. So basically how that works out is the original problem is f of x equals to 3x minus 2, and basically I'm replacing all my x's now with 2x minus 1. So if I do that, this will be 3, and then bracket 2x minus 1, and then I have a negative 2 there, and then we just evaluate this. So we distribute this, so the 3 distributes onto the 2x minus 1, so that will give me 6x minus 3, and then I subtract the 2 here, and if I do that, I get 6x, and then negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5, so 6x minus 5. Okay, so move on to question 2e now. Now I have f of x plus h. So I know that my original function, let me just rewrite this again. I have 3x minus 2. And basically this x here will now be replaced with the x plus h, right? So this will be 3 onto x plus h, and then the minus the 2. And then I just distribute this. If I distribute that, I get 3x plus 3h, and then the minus 2 comes down, and that's actually my final answer right there, 3x plus 3h minus 2. Okay, let's move on to question 2f now. So now I have f of x plus f of h. Okay, so my original problem once again was f of x equals to 3x minus 2. Let's go ahead and evaluate f of let's evaluate this part first, f of h, right? So f of h. Alright, so the x value now gets replaced with h. So this x is now going to be replaced with h, right? So it'll be 3 onto h, and then minus 2. And if I evaluate this, this is simply going to be just 3h minus 2. Okay, so I can bring that up to here. So that's going to be 3h minus 2. And then there's a plus sign in front. And then ask yourself, what is f of x? Well, f of x is right here, right? And f of x equals to 3x minus 2. So I can take my 3x minus 2 and bring it to the front here. So 3x minus 2. And then all you have to do now is just evaluate this expression here, and this minus 2 and that minus 2, that combines into negative 4, and then the 3x, and then plus the 3h remain, right? So that's your final answer right there, 3x plus 3h minus 4. Okay, that's it for question number 2. So question number 2 had a bit of algebra there. Let's move on to question number 4 now. All right, so for question number 4, I'm given that f of x equals to negative 5x plus 2, And now I'm doing like kind of a backwards operation where the question gives me that f of x equals to negative 3. Okay, so basically if I kind of rewrite the original statement, this part right here, let me just rewrite that again. F of x equals to negative 5x plus 2. Now you have to understand what this is saying here. It's saying that f of x equals to negative 3. So this part right here, this f of x, it's equal to negative 3. So what you can do there is just bring down the negative 3 and then keep the right hand side the same. Okay, so if f of x equals to negative 3, I mean I can replace the f of x down here with negative 3. All right, and you'll be doing that quite a bit in the homework questions for this particular section. And all you're doing now is you're just isolating for the x variable here, right? So what do I do with this plus 2? Well, I bring it over, and now it becomes a negative 2. And then I have a negative 5x here. The negative 5x remains on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, negative 3 minus 2 is going to be negative 5. And then we can divide both sides by negative 5. And you'll see that those cancel off, and x equals to negative 1. So for question 4a, x would equal to negative 1 as a final answer. And as I do more of these questions, I probably won't write out like every single step, but I'll just kind of jump down to what you really need to do here, right? So for question for question 4b, here's f of x, right? Well, f of x equals to negative 5x plus 2, right? So here's my negative 5x plus 2, and that equals to 7. And now all you're doing now is you're solving a very basic linear equation here. So I have a negative 5x here. This plus 2 goes to the other side, and it becomes 7 minus 2. And 7 minus 2 is going to be 5. And then I can divide both sides by negative 5 here. And that negative 5 and that negative 5 will cancel off, so x would equal to negative 1. All right, so for question 4b, the answer is x equals to negative 1. All right, let's move on to question 4c now. All right, so what is f of x equal to again? Well, f of x equals to negative 5x plus 2, and that equals to negative 12. And then I can bring this plus 2 to the other side. So now I have negative 5x equals to negative 12 minus 2. And now I have negative 5x on the left-hand side, and negative 12 minus 2 is going to be negative 14. And then I can divide both sides by negative 5. So this negative 5 and that negative 5 will cancel off, and I get x equals to, negative 14 divided by negative 5 is going to be positive 14 over 5. So my final answer for question 4c is x equals to 14 over 5. Okay, let's move on to letter D now. And for letter D, I know f of x. F of x is equal to negative 5x plus 2, which was given to us at the start of the problem. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side here, I have negative 5. And once again, now we're just solving for this x variable there. So I can bring that positive 2 to the other side, and if I do that, I get negative 5 minus 2, and negative 5 minus 2 is going to be negative 7, and I have negative 5x on the left-hand side, and I can divide both sides by negative 5, and once again, the negative 5's cancel, so x would equal to positive 7 over 5 as my final answer there. So x equals to 7 over 5. All right, let's move on to the last two letters for question number 4. So f of x equals to a. And remember, what is f of x equal to again? Well, it equals to negative 5x plus 2, and that equals to a. And now we're just solving for the x variable there. So I can take this positive 2 and move it to the other side. If I take that 2 and move it to the other side, it becomes negative 2. And then from there, I can divide both sides by negative 5. And then this negative 5 and that negative 5 will cancel. So my final answer is a minus 2 divided by negative 5. Great. Okay, let's move on to question number letter F here. And once again, f of x will be replaced with negative 5x plus 2. And that's going to equal to negative 5a plus 7. All right, and our goal is to solve for that x variable, so I can take this plus 2 and move it over. If I do that, I get negative 5x on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, I have negative 5a plus 7, and then I have the minus 2 there. All right, so a little bit more work here. And on the right-hand side, I have negative 5a, and plus 7 minus 2 is going to be positive 5. And then I can divide both sides by negative 5. And if I do that, that will cancel off. And now I have x equals to negative 5a plus 5, all divided by negative 5. Now, although this is correct, you can definitely simplify this a little bit more, where you can take this part and that part and write that as a single fraction. And then you can take this positive 5 and also divide that by negative 5. So I have positive 5 divided by negative 5. And then just simplify this, right? So the negative 5's cancel, giving you just the single a. And then this right here is because it will be negative 1, right? So 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. So there's your final answer there. And for actually going back to question 4e, although this is a correct answer here, I know the back of the book actually has a slightly different answer here. And what you can do to kind of simplify this further is you can just kind of switch the two terms here. So I can write this as negative 2 plus a divided by negative 5. And then from there, you can actually factor out the negative sign on the numerator. So if I factor out the negative sign, I get 2 minus a, all divided by negative 5. And this minus sign is really the same thing as a negative 1, right? And basically this part right here and that part right here, that just simplifies to a positive 1 all over positive 5, which is the same thing as 2 minus a all over 5. All right, so I know the back of the book has the answer written like that, but this is also an acceptable answer as well. Okay, let's move on to a few more questions here now. Let me just kind of erase this so I have a little more space to do the next question here. So this is question 5D now. So I need to graph this over the set of real numbers here. This one's not too bad because I know the y-intercept is negative 4. So if I go ahead and find my negative 4 value here, this is where I can start. So here's negative 4. And I know my slope is going to be negative 2 over 3. So what this really means is you go up. I always go up first. So I go up 2. And then because of this minus sign and that 3, that means I go left 3. So up 2 and left 3 from this starting point. So if I go up 2 and left 3, then I would be over 1, 2, 3 at this point right there. All right, so up 2 and left 3, right? And then from there, I just keep on going up 2 and left 3. So up 2 and then 1, 2, 3. And then go back to my starting point, and now I can go down 2 and right 3. And there you go. So there's my those are my main coordinates, and then I can just graph. I can connect the dots there, and there is my completed graph there. Okay, let's move on to the next one here, which is question 5F. And as you can see, this is no longer a linear function, right? There's x to the power 2, so we have to kind of figure out how to graph this. And one of the main strategies that that is used in this particular section of the homework is using a table of values. And what I recommend for the table of values for this particular problem is I would always start off with 0 if you can, because 0 will be plugged into that x value. And let me just do the calculations right here on the side here, right? So if I have negative 1 over 4, and there's a squared there plus a 4, if I go ahead and plug in a 0 here, what you'll notice is that this whole expression here, 0 squared times negative 1 over 4, that just goes to 0. And then when you add 4 to it, 0 plus 4 is just 4. So 4 just goes in for the y variable right there. So there you go. Start off with 0 first, and then you can easily calculate the y value, which is just plus 4 in this case. Now, another little trick for these kind of problems is that you do more of these in pre-calc 11. If you see a 4 there, what I recommend doing is that you should find multiples. Sorry, your x value, you should always find multiples of 4 if you can. So I would recommend using an x value of 4 next. All right, so what that means is if you take this 4 and plug it in there, it's going to be 4 squared, right? And then let's just see what happens here. I got negative 1 over 4, and then ask yourself, what is 4 squared? Well, 4 squared is going to be 16, and then plus this 4 here, right? And we do enough of these in class where 16 divided by 4, well, that's going to be 4, right? And 4 times this 1, and this minus sign is going to give you negative 4. And then we add the plus 4, and then we get a 0 there. All right, so when x is 4, y is 0. And the last number that I recommend students to try for this one is going to be negative 4. So let's go ahead and plug in negative 4 into here. If I do that, we can just put a minus sign right there. And let's go ahead and calculate this now. This is negative 1 over 4. And this part right here, remember, this is really like negative 4 times negative 4, which is going to be positive 16. And then we add the positive 4 there. And 16 divided by 4 is going to be 4. And then this minus sign makes it negative 4. And then plus 4 would give you 0. Right, and that's pretty much all the points you really need here, right? So let's go ahead and graph this now. 0, 4, right? That's going to be about here, right? It's going to be that point right there, 0, 4. And then 4, 0, that's going to be about here. And then finally, negative 4, 0, that's going to be around here, I believe. Good. And then once you have all those points kind of connected, all you have to do is kind of like connect the dots here, and you'll get this curvy shape here. And that shape is called a parabola, and students will learn more about parabolas in pre-calculus 11. And for pre-calculus 10, in our course, we just graph them by using a table of values here. Okay, let's move on to question number 7 here. So for question number 7, we have a few more questions where we have to do some numerical calculations here. So g of r equals to 2 pi r, and whenever this when this r variable basically is being replaced by 0.5 for question 7a. So anytime I see the letter r, which is, there's an r right there, that's going to be replaced with 0.5. All right, so this will be 2 times pi, and let me just write out the r again. And basically what I'm just trying to say here is that this 0.5 will replace this r value right there. So this will be 2 pi. Now, instead of writing 0.5, I will write that as just 1/2, because 1/2 is 0.5. And then you'll notice that this 2 and that 2 will cancel, and then pi times 1 is just pi. So there's your answer for question 7a. All right, so for 7b, I know the original question was 2 pi r, and basically what's happening is this r is being replaced with 8/3. So this will be 2 pi times by 8 divided by 3. And then for this question here, I would just multiply it through because I can't really simplify anything else. So 2 times 8 is going to be 16. And then this 3, I can bring it to the front as 16 over 3. And then this pi here will remain as just pi, right? So 16 over 3 times pi is your final answer. And for letter for letter C here, I know this equals to 2 pi r. Let me just erase that. And basically r now is being replaced with h. So this will be 2 pi times h. And that's it for that particular letter. Okay, let's move on to letter D now. So I know that the original problem was equal to 2 pi r. And for this problem, r is now being replaced with h plus 2. So this will be 2 pi, and then bracket h plus 2. And then from here, you're going to take this 2 pi, and you will distribute that into the brackets. If I do that, I get 2 pi h plus, and then this 2 times that 2 gives you a 4, right? So it'll be 4 pi. And there's your final answer for 7D. Okay, let's move on to question number 10 now. And for 10, similar problem, but now I'm given g of r equals to pi r squared h. So for all these problems, I can make them equal to pi r squared h. And basically your r variable now is being replaced with 1/2 for the very first problem. So this will be pi. And let me put this in brackets here with the squared and then the h. I'll put the squared in blue there. And instead of writing 1/2, actually never mind, I will write that as 1/2, right? So 1/2 is replacing the r, right? And remember, basically what's happening with this problem now is 1/2 is being squared, right? So that's the same thing as 1/2 times 1/2. And then the h remains. And then ask yourself, what's 1/2 times 1/2? Well, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, right? So this would be 1/4 times h. Now, although that's correct, I would just write this as, I would put the pi and the h in front. So write that as pi h. And then this part here, the 1/4, I would write that as just with a 4 on the bottom there. So pi h divided by 4. Okay, so move on to letter B now. So g of 8/3, and that's going to equal to pi r squared h. And basically the 8/3 will replace the r variable. So if I do that, I get pi, and then bracket 8/3, and all that's being squared times h. Now think about this calculation over here, 8/3 to the power 2. That's the same thing as 8/3 times 8/3, and 8 times 8 is 64, and 3 times 3 is 9. So this is really going to be 64/9, and then times by h. And although this is correct, I would just kind of just rearrange this. 64 times pi is going to be 64 pi, and then this h will just tag along, and then we can divide this whole thing by 9. So I would write your answer as 64 pi h/9. Okay, let's move on to letter C now. And for letter C, let me just erase this. Okay, so this is now going to equal to pi r squared h. And our r variable is going to be replaced with h. So if I do that, I get h here to the power of 2 times h. And now this will be pi times, well, this is just h squared times a single h. Sorry, I put that in black. And really there's an invisible 1 here, right? And if I take a look at this expression right here, when you're multiplying with the same bases, you just add the powers, right? So this will be pi times h to the power 3. And that's it. So pi times h cubed. All right, so we want to letter D now, and let's make this equal to pi r squared h. And now I have h plus 2, and that's going to be that will replace the r variable, right? So if I write that out correctly, that'll be pi times h plus 2 to the power of 2, and then times by h. So that h is right there, and that pi is right there. Okay, and this is a good opportunity to use the square double square technique. I mean, you could also FOIL that out if you like, but I'll use the square double square technique. All right, so what is h squared? Well, h squared is just h squared. And then what is 2 times h? Well, that's 2h, and how do I double that? That's going to be 4h if I double that. And finally, the square double square technique means I take this last number here and I just square it. So 2 times 2 is going to be 4. So there it is. There's the square double square technique for that particular problem there. And then we have the h, which remains down there. Okay, so now we've got to simplify all this. I recommend that you distribute this h here. So let's just go backwards now. This is 4h. And then h times that is going to be 4h squared, and then this orange h times h squared is going to be h cubed. All right, so let's put that in the brackets and then the pi. And this is a correct answer, and if you want to go ahead now and distribute the pi, you can. And if I do that, I would get pi times h cubed plus 4 pi h squared, and finally I have 4 pi h. And there's your final answer for question 10D. Okay, let's see if we can get some of these graphing questions done now. So some of these questions are a bit weird, so I'll do my very best to kind of explain every single one of these problems here. So this is question number 11 now, 11A. And for 11A, use the graph of each function to state the domain, and then I need the range, and I need to evaluate f of 2, and I need to solve for f of x equals to 2. So a lot going on in this particular problem here. Here's step number 1. I would definitely look at all these points, and I would write down the coordinates of those points. I would write down the coordinates of those points to get started here. All right, so this point right here is going to be, I believe that's going to be -2, 4. And this point right here is going to be 0, 2. This point right here, I believe, is 2, 0. And then this point right here is 4, -2. Okay, so step number 1, I need to find my domain, right? So the domain is basically your x values. So my x values for this case are -2, 0, +2, and +4. So that's my domain, right? So my domain is -2, 0, 2, and +4. Okay, and then for my range, actually never mind, I will highlight my range in yellow here. So range is just my y values, right? So my y values are 4, 2, 0, and -2, right? So those are my so here are my range values, right, in red. Okay, and I recommend that you go from least to greatest. So if I go from least to greatest, then a -2 is my smallest numbers, and then I have a 0, and then I have a +2 and a +4. So there's my range right there. Okay, so that's basically it for your domain range. You're finding your x values and your y values. Okay, let me just erase all that. Okay, next question is I need to find f of 2, right? So basically what this really means is f of 2 means is that your x value is 2. So when x is 2, what is the y value? That's basically what this question is asking for. And basically this really corresponds to this point right here, right? Because this point right here in orange is really 2, 0, right? So basically the y value is going to be 0. So this equals to 0. Okay. All right, that's it for that particular question. And now let's move on to the last one here, which is f of x equals to 2. All right, so the question is f of x equals to 2. So basically this question is basically saying what x value has a height of 2? Or if I write this in coordinates, which x value, question mark, gives you a y value of 2, which is your height? Okay, so which x value has a height of 2? That's basically what the question is asking for. And I believe that corresponds to this particular point right there, because this point right here is 0, 2, right? So notice that this 2 matches that. So the x value that gives you a y value of 2 is going to be 0. So that means this answer is x equals to 0 as well. Good. All right, so that's it for question 11A. Let's move on to 11B here. 11B is a little bit tougher here. So for 11B, what I'll do here is I'll start off by labeling the endpoints right here. So there's 2 blue dots. So for that blue dot right there, that has the value of, that's the coordinate of 5, 4. And then this blue value over here has the coordinates of -3 and -4. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the domain. So the domain is basically asking what are the possible x values here. Okay, so let's take a look at this number line here. If I draw a horizontal number line right here, my lowest value to the left is -3, and my highest x value to the right is 5, right? So my domain really takes on everything between -3 and 5. That is my domain. My domain is everything between -3 and 5. Now, how do I write that mathematically? Well, you start off with your lower number, which is -3, and then you put your higher number, which is 5, on the right-hand side. And what you're saying is you want everything between -3 and 5. So your x value would go right in the middle, right? Because x is between -3 and -5, and the signs always point towards the left. All right. This means x, which is your domain, is everything between -3 and 5. So this is your domain right here. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at the range. All right, so the range is really, basically your range is really like your y values, right? So if I actually draw a vertical line here, right, kind of like there. Okay, so what's the lowest y value that you have? Well, my lowest y value is -4, right? And what's my highest y value? Well, my highest y value is +4. Okay, so we're kind of going back to that same number line where my range now is everything between +4 and -4, right? That's my range, everything between -4 and +4. Well, how do I write that? Well, you put your lower number on the left-hand side, you put your higher number on the right-hand side, and you're saying everything between -4 and 4. So please put your y variable between -4 and 4. And just make sure your signs are always pointing to the left like that. And that's my range right there. So -4 less than or equal to y less than or equal to +4. All right, so there's your domain, your range for that particular problem. All right, let's move on to the other questions here. Basically, I got to find f of 2, right? So basically what this really means is your x value is going to be 2, and what's the corresponding y height? All right, so on your graph here, here's 2, right? 2 is right there, and ask yourself, what is the height? Well, the height right here is going to be +1. So 1 would go right there. All right, so this equals to 1. And finally, the last question here is I have f of x equals to 2, right? So basically this 2 now means that this is the y value. All right, so when the y value is 2, the question is, what is the x value? A very good way to do a problem like this is that you find your y value of 2, which is right there, and some students just draw a horizontal line right across that y value, and students are looking for the intersection point, which is right there, and the x value there is going to be 3, right? So x would equal to 3. All right, so if x is 3 here, then the y value is 2, right? So right there, this is point right here is 3, 2. All right, good. So that's it for question 11b. And for the final question on this homework, sorry, I have a few more here. I have 2 more questions to go on this homework video guide here. I'm given a horizontal line here. And since this goes forever left and forever right, it's the domain for this problem is all real numbers, right? So I'll say all real numbers here. So it's every single number possible. And what's the range now? Well, what's the height of this graph? Well, the height of this graph is +3, right? So I don't go higher or lower than 3, so my range is just simply 3. Okay, what about f of 2, right? So once again, what does f of 2 really mean? It really means that the x value is 2, and the question is asking, what is the y height? All right, so when x is 2, what is the y height? Well, here's 2, and if I go straight up, the height is going to be 3, right? So this point right here is 2, 3. So this is going to be 3 right there. Good. And finally, the last one here is f of x equals to 2. So the question is, this question is now saying when the y value is 2, what is the x value? All right, so once again, if you go to the graph here, here's the height of 2, and if you draw a horizontal line, does that blue horizontal line intersect this green line? It doesn't. So there is no y value, sorry, there is no x value such that the y value will be 2. So this one we'll say there's none. All right. There is no x value that has a height of 2 because all the heights are 3 in this graph. Okay, so move on to the last one here, letter D here. Now I would say this is a pretty tough one here. You do see this in some of the senior math classes like pre-calc 12 and calc 12 here, and I got to figure out what my domain and what my range and f of 2 and what f of x equals to 2 is for this graph here. So this is this is called a step graph here. Let's go ahead and figure out the domain first, and the domain here, I will look at this point right here, and that point is -1, -1. And I would also take a look at this point right here, this orange, that point right there highlighted in orange. And that point right there is really, I believe it's 3, 2. Okay. Now, if I actually just draw a horizontal line, the lowest value is -1, and the highest x value is actually going to be 3, right? Right, so I'm looking at this -1 and that 3, right? So for this particular problem, my domain is everything between -1 and 3. Now the problem is there's a hole right there, right? There's a hole, all right? And this dot over here is a solid dot, right? So the way we kind of write the domain for this is that we're trying to say that it's everything between -1 and 3. And if it's everything between, the x value always goes in the middle. And as I mentioned before in the previous questions, the signs always point this way, right? But the problem is with this part right here. So since there's a hole here, there's a hole at 3, right? So basically what we do is with this equal sign there, we just simply get rid of it, because it doesn't actually equal 3, right? It gets pretty close to 3, but not including 3. So we don't have that underlined the underlined symbol there on the x value of 3. So my domain for this graph is going to be -1, less than or equal to x, and less than 3. Okay. After that, let's look at the range now. Now the range is also going to be a little bit tough for this graph here. Now one thing that you have to understand is for this graph here, notice that there's all these gaps here for the height, right? So I get that the height here, the lowest value for this height is going to be -1. And then this height here is going to be 0, and this height here is going to be +1, and this height here is going to be +2, right? And since you have all those gaps in between, you just look at the y values, and your y values, there's only 4 of them. The 4 values are -1, 0, 1, and +2. So that's your range right there. So your range is just -1, 0, 1, and +2. Okay, so we'll make sure you're clear with the difference between the domain and the range, right? Your domain has these inequality signs because it's taking on every single value between -1 and up to 3, and not including 3. But your range doesn't have those inequality signs because you have all these gaps in the graph, right? The gaps are highlighted in blue, right? So, for example, right here, this height could be like a half, right? But the graph, it actually doesn't really cover a height it doesn't cover a height of a half. It just covers a height of +1 and 0, right? So we don't go anything between 0 and 1. We just have 0 and +1 only. We don't cover anything between 0 and 1. So therefore the range will not have those inequality signs. Okay, so hopefully that kind of made a little bit of sense. If you're not sure, please ask me in class. What about f of 2, right? So what does that really mean again, right? What that means is your x value is 2, and I want to know what is the y value. And for this question here, it's the opposite, right? We're telling you that the y value is 2, and I want to figure out what the x value is. So that's it for these particular questions, right? To finish off this, this particular graph here. Okay, so let's look at this graph here. When x is 2, this is x is 2, right? What is the height? Well, the only height that's available is actually this dot right there, which also has a value of 2, right? So this will be just +2. Okay, and then finally the last one here. Let me just erase all that. If the y value has a height of 2, what is the x value? Okay, so that was a bit of a tricky one, right? So the y value is 2, right? So what you can do is you can draw a horizontal line of 2 here, and you'll notice that what x values actually have a height of 2. Well, it's this stuff right here, right? That blue region right there, right? So let me erase that. So it's that blue region, right? So ask yourself, what are the x values there, right? Well, this x value is 2, and this x value is 3. So it's everything between 2 and 3. So it's everything between 2 and 3. So now my x value will go there. So it's everything between. So the signs always go this way. And since you have a hole there, as I mentioned, then you just need to get rid of this